Hello and welcome back to a new video for Adeptus Custodes. Today we're going to do a little in-depth dive on rapid ingress and particularly with Wardens. So here, what is rapid ingress? It's one of the universal stratagems that you get in your core rulebook. It's easy to kind of glaze over because you've been kind of inundated with an absolute plethora of new data from 10th with the indices and the new rules and the commentary on the rules, blah, blah, blah. So it's really easy to kind of skip over this. So what is this stratagem? It's a 1CP stratagem, and you do it at the end of your opponent's movement phase. And this is really big because this allows you to do things in your opponent's movement phase where typically you don't. So you target one of your units from your army that's in reserves, and as far as I can tell, reserves are now free. Obviously, we get much better flexibility if the unit that we choose has deep strike. Luckily for us, our guardians, our wardens, our terminators have deep strike innately, and the effect is you can arrive on the battlefield as if it were the reinforcement step of your movement phase. But you can't use the stratagem to arrive on the battlefield in a battle round where it wouldn't ordinarily be able to do so, which is like turn 1, for example. Obviously, that would be way too strong. So why is this such a big deal? And the important thing is when you drop in on your opponent's movement turn, if you can survive their shooting and their charges and their fight phase, you basically get a guaranteed charge because now you get to move when you're like 9 inches away from them and you get to charge. And this makes your threat radius from where you arrive very massive. And if that's in their back line where it's less protected, they've got less angles to shoot at you, or they have to move backwards to protect their backfield, that's all beneficial for you. So obviously this can be extremely, extremely punishing if it's not dealt with. And the primary way that armies will kind of repel or discourage rapid ingress is to have screening, or if they can't screen, they basically shoot you or they charge you, right? Obviously, if you pop into their back lines, they're more likely to have a larger number of guns that they can point at you, and probably, if they have any melee threat, you're probably within range for them to charge you because you're kind of moving towards them. So what is the best unit in our army for rapid ingress? So because we have access to fight first as a stratagem, we can kind of actually ignore 99% of charge and melee threats. That's probably not quite right because we still have to be wary of stuff that fights on death, for example, and things that can do a ton of mortal wounds to us, for like tank shock and brutalis dreads or whatever. We have our 4++ versus the mortal wounds, but it's still something to keep in mind. So probably this 99% is not quite accurate. But what this means is that usually if we have access to fight first, we don't mind being charged at all. It's actually just bringing the food to us, and we're quite happy with that result. So what this means is that we need 2 CP or a shield captain. I think obviously you're always going to have a shield captain in a unit that you rapid ingress. It's just too much value. So that is that. So the thing to keep in mind is obviously all armies can rapid ingress. Our army, because we have access to fight first as a stratagem, makes it that we actually almost can ignore the charge and fight phase threat from the opponent army. So the only thing we actually have to consider as a check is, can we survive their shooting phase? So if the opponent doesn't have a credible melee threat, we can just ignore that cost, and all we have to really focus on is surviving their shooting phase. So if we need to, and probably we will, we'll be popping Arcane Genetic Alchemy for the -1 damage in the opponent shooting phase. And this is obviously amazing versus 2 damage weapons because it's like a straight 50% reduction, with reducing value of the stratagem as the damage goes higher and higher. And if your opponent army has kind of mortal wound proccing damage that's very high and it spills, you're not going to have a good time. But to be honest, if you're up against an army that has access to that kind of damage anyway, irrespective of what you're doing, I think most armies facing that are going to have a bad time, and I think you know which armies they are. So here, I think the standout candidate in our army are Wardens, because once you have a character leading the units, they get -1 to wound versus highest strength, and a once per game 4++ feel no pain, which is massive. So why is this good? So when we do rapid ingress, if you imagine a unit of 4 Wardens and a shield captain, it's a massive threat in the back line. So because you're going to have access to move, shoot, charge, whatever you want back there, they either have to allow you to do that, or they have to dump tons and tons of fire into that unit to get rid of that threat. Obviously, you may have created some additional angles for them to get line of sight onto you, but because you do it at the end of their movement phase, you can kind of choose strategically, where you want to rapid ingress into. You might decide you want to go into a slightly different position to get out of line of sight of these guns, for example, or slightly out of charge range of something, which again probably you don't care about. So because the worst we can be wounded on is a 4+, because if they're higher strength than us, then it's -1 to wound typically. Unless they have like +1 to wound or something like that to cancel that out. We're saving on a 4++. We get the damage reduction, and then a 4+ feel no pain. This is actually quite a lot of damage reduction. So arbitrarily, I've picked something like, let's say you have to face 30 BS3 shots, strength 8 -4 AP, flat 3 damage, and they don't have rerolls. Now, this is an extremely arbitrary number. It is quite a lot of damage, but I think it's going to be in the region of, or maybe slightly more than what you're likely to face, assuming that they decide to concentrate on this unit. So if you had a blob of Wardens, you're looking at something like 20 hits with 30 shots at BS3, half of them wound, half of them are unsaved on the invul, and 15 times 3 is 15, but you have the -1 damage reduction, so you're looking at 10 damage, and after the feel no pain, you're looking at 5 that go through. So you're probably looking at two dead Wardens. Whereas if you do this on a unit of guard, you're looking at 20 hits, 13.2 wounds, 6.6 unsaved, and now it's 13.2. So you're looking at the difference between 2 and 4 models. You might think that's not that massive, but it is actually quite a lot. It's like a 100-point difference. And also you have to think about your the deployment size, the footprint of the unit, and where it can fit. And obviously if you have a massive blob, it's going to be harder to fit into some places, and you're going to suffer more against high damage blast weapons, which get bonuses versus bigger units. But the main thing is, obviously you get a slightly better than 50% reduction because of the 4+ feel no pain, obviously, and because they can't wound you on better than a 4 typically. So you have to keep in mind turn 2 is the Custodes' typical make or break turn, right? Because turn 1, we're not known for our fantastic guns. We have some guns with Forge World, but typically we're known as a melee army. So turn 1, you typically move up. You might plink a few shots here and there, but really you're just clenching your arsehole because you think, okay, can I survive the opponent's turn 1 shooting? And then turn 2, hopefully you make it into melee with a bunch of your threats. All right. So here, if we do rapid ingress, we kind of guarantee that one of our charges goes off as long as we can survive their shooting phase, and it presents an additional threat that they have to fire into. So what this forces them to do is either shoot the thing that's moving up the board, that you advance up turn 1, and hopefully by turn 2 you're in the threat range to charge something like a reliable charge-ish, let's say 6 inches, and you've got this guaranteed charge from the rapid ingress target. So it guarantees that you're able to kind of force your enemy to split fire, and if they shoot at your Warden unit, it's actually not even that bad, because if they have to shoot into a unit that has all the buffs up, you're actually getting incredible value out of that unit, because you're making them shoot into a massively inefficient target, which means the rest of your army is more likely to survive and get to where they need to go to do the critical damage that they need for you to win the game. So my checklist for when you would want to use rapid ingress is basically can or are you very likely to be screened out versus the high value targets that you want to get to. So if you're up against a horde army, it's probably not worth rapid ingressing because they'll just screen you out completely, and you would have been better off applying pressure, starting the unit on the board. Are they an elite shooting army that can't screen and they've got crap melee? So something like Tau with many heavy suits or vehicles, right? Here, you only need 1 CP really, and that's for the rapid ingress, because you don't need to keep 2 CP in the bank for fight first, because you don't care if they fight first or you fight first, right? Let them hit you with, I don't know, one of their commanders or something, and the little battle suits. Like you're just not going to care about it, and they're not going to charge you realistically anyway. The only thing that you really need is -1 damage in the shooting phase, and then you pop your feel no pain. And that's obviously very good. So I think against an army like Tau, this is a very good candidate, assuming that they don't screen you out. Against an elite mixed army, something like Space Marines, where they've got credible shooting and credible melee, you're going to need 3 CP, right? You're going to need 1 CP for the stratagem itself. you're going to need 2 CP for AGA or fight first, all right? And the other one you use with your shield captain for free. So when you're considering how many CP that you need to run the strat, you have to keep this in mind because you cannot afford to rapid ingress and be like, oh, I actually don't have enough CP for arcane genetic alchemy, and you just end up getting shot off the board. That's kind of pointless. Obviously, you get a bit of value from your 4+ Feel No Pain, but you lose the 1 CP for the rapid ingress and the whole unit. So I don't think that's terribly good. But the other thing to keep in mind is even though there might be a mixed army, if you can actually land in a place where they're not in charge range, right, or they don't have good melee units nearby, you might not need this actually. So you just have to calculate how many CP you need for where they're going to land. So what does this not work against, right? So, obviously everyone's had the new field manual with the points for a day or two. Obviously there are some issues with it, let's say. So this is not a stratagem that's going to work against every army. We're basically not durable enough to withstand a lot of the shooting that is available in 10th currently for the points that they are. And so you have to keep in mind, our army is not as durable as it used to be, right? We used to have access to dancers than everyone else. We had our banner for -1 to hit as well, which often meant that we were able to counteract a +1 to hit, so that we ended up net -1 to hit. We had access to transhuman, which is kind of replicated by the Warden special rule, although not fully because they could have +1 to hit. No rerolls is a massive one. That's a change, because that's a really good way to bypass can't be wounded on better 7/4s. And as such, while -1 damage is good, it falls off very, very quickly versus high damage weapons, and especially weapons that have mortal wounds spilling, because mortal wounds kind of ignore our invul save, right? And the like they have to roll a 6 or use a 6 to wound us anyway, so it's already bypassing all of that protection. So that's no good. So I think Custodes, along with a lot of other armies, are basically just waiting for some nerfs to factions like Eldar, Space Marines, Knights, and I think these are the 3 main agrarious ones that we have to keep in mind. So in the interim, we just have to kind of put together in our toolbox a number of stratagems that we have in our pocket that we think, okay, this is the game plan, this is what we're going to do for when the game becomes a bit more balanced. Anyway, so hopefully that was a helpful video for some of you guys. If you enjoyed the video and you got here to the end, thank you very much. Hopefully the audio quality was better this time. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, just for the algorithm to be like, yes, you exist and people enjoy your content. And I'll see you guys next time. Thank you very much.